and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much for coming. It's a real pleasure to be able to share our findings from the Fresher study, or the Food Retail Environment Study for Health and Economic Resiliency. Fresher is a study of the effects of COVID-19 on food retail and food hospitality sector across Ontario. And I'm, as Deb mentioned, I'm speaking on behalf of a very large team from the Human Environments Analysis Lab, but also we're very appreciative of the support from the Elgin Middlesex Oxford Workforce Planning and Development Board and the Government of Ontario. So before I get too far into this talk, for the next 30 minutes or so, I should give you today's menu. And I'm going to begin with a little bit of why Fresher? Why do we do this project? I want to introduce our team. I want to talk about our study design, some of the activities that took place, our key findings, the tools and strategies that we recommend based on this research, and our plan for Fresher moving forward. And I presume there's going to be some time for questions at the end. And of course, this all is a snapshot of a larger report that is available through our website and available through the Workforce Planning and Development Board. So why Fresher? The Food Retail Environment Study for Health and Economic Resiliency is a study of the effects of COVID-19 on restaurants, fast food outlets, grocery stores, cafes, bars, alcohol, and other food and beverage retail stores across Ontario. We launched this study early in the pandemic as a response to the widespread closures and real uncertainty in the industry. Back in February 2020, Ontario's retail and food services sector employed 1.5 million people. And by the end of April 2020, according to Stats Canada, sector employment decreased to just a little over 1 million people. So about a 28% drop there. And that was really our impetus for undertaking this project back early in the pandemic. So we had hoped through this work that we would gather this information and it would be useful to help assess the economic and social impacts of COVID-19 on food retail and hospitality businesses and employees, as well as we wanted to gather some useful evidence and recommendations that can be used to help redevelop programs, policies, and strategies that will aid in the recovery of the industry and build resiliency for the future and for future emergencies and pandemics. And back when we began this, we never realized that this pandemic would be going on so long. So to tackle such a wicked problem like COVID-19, we needed a multidisciplinary collaboration. As you can see, it was a very large collaboration. Our team represents a unique collaboration of individuals across sectors: academia, government, business, and nonprofit. The lead authors were from the HEAL Lab and Workforce, so myself and Marcello Vecchio, project coordinator, and Alexander Ray, as well as Deb Mountainay, the ED of the Elgin Middlesex Oxford Workforce Planning and Development Board. We also had a really excellent team of academic co-investigators, so professors from Western and Laurier and Guelph and Brescia and Waterloo. So Dr. Bob Anderson, Godwin Arku, Sean Doherty, John Fleming, Jess Haynes, Anders Holm, Leah Miniker, Jamie Seabrook, and Paul Vanderwerf. As well, we had a wonderful research team from the HEAL Lab, the Human Environments Analysis Lab, Dr. Louise McEachran, Lindsay Soon, Rebecca Clark, Alexander Morgenthaler, Alexandra Overveld, Claire Coops, Carmen Ng, Olivia Caruso, Heather Yancey. And as Deb mentioned, we had a wonderful steering committee, including Deb Mountainay, Kate Burns-Gallagher, Art Gibson, Beth Anstedt, Kim Earls, Colin Galloway, and Joanne Wolnick. And also, you know, from the very beginning of this project, we adopted what we called an integrated knowledge translation approach. And we did this throughout the project by regularly engaging with industry stakeholders. And since the launch of the project, we have had meetings with representatives from over 50 different relevant organizations, and some of them are listed below in this diagram. So our study design incorporated multiple data collection activities and analytical procedures to identify and what we say triangulate the impacts of COVID. So there was 3 key research activities. First, mapping the operational status and closures of businesses across Ontario. And we really did this. We wanted to learn about their strategies, such as opening patios, use of third-party and in-house delivery services, whether they belong to a BIA, etc. Second part was surveying impacts on employees and employers in the food sector. And we wanted to learn about changing employment status, perceptions of financial programs, daily struggles, and overall well-being. And third, we had interviews. Originally we set out to do interviews with owners and managers, but we included workers and extra-sectoral stakeholders to collect perspectives on their present situation and strategies for resiliency. And these interviews were semi-structured to ensure the topics were covered, but also allowing flexibility of responses. So when we began the study, our intention was to focus our efforts on the territory of our key partner, the Elgin Middlesex Oxford Workforce Planning Development Board. So Middlesex, Oxford, Elgin, but we also added Waterloo region, some of our collaborators from there. So as you can see in the dark color on that map, that was our original territory, which we call MEOW for short. But additional cross-sector collaborations and energy led us to expand our attention to the territory represented by the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, or WOWC, which is also shown in the map on orange. And finally, again, with additional resources and energy and our team's desire to widen our impact, we expanded our efforts to all of Ontario. Okay, the image on the right highlights fresher activities by the numbers. So we have mapped 28,307 food businesses across the province. We have made over 60,000 phone calls to businesses to get this information about operating status, etc. We received 490 completed surveys from employees and employers. We completed 152 interviews with a wide range of people involved in food, retail, and hospitality. And as mentioned before, we have a large team. We had 10 professors, 11 key staff, 8 graduate students, as well as over 800 undergraduate students were involved in various capacities in this project. So it's quite the effort. So our first key activity, and here I'm shifting into the findings, our first key activity was to map food businesses. On the left, we have a map of the number of businesses by census division. And on the right, we have density of food businesses per square kilometer. So these are all the businesses we mapped. And as expected, these maps revealed the greatest number and greatest density of businesses are found in the areas with the largest and most dense populations. This map identifies the percentage of food hospitality businesses that were closed in each census division within WOWC. The darker the area, the higher the closure rate. Now, I should say that closure was assessed in 2 ways. First, it was confirmed directly by researchers through phone calls, web searches, media releases, and other contact methods. Or after repeated attempts through phone calls, emails, and social media, the researcher could not get in touch with the business representative, nor find any other evidence online that we were operational, then we assumed closure. So you'll recall that we made over 60,000 phone calls to complete this activity, as well as extensive web searches. So the table at right shows the number of food hospitality businesses and closure rates by county. So these county statistics include business data in the first tier municipalities encompassed by a county. So for example, the City of London data is included in Middlesex, Windsor is included in Essex, St. Thomas, and Elgin, etc. So closure rates ranged from a high of 26.7% in Brant County, which would include Brantford, to a low of 8.2% in Perth County, which includes Stratford. At the launch of our project, soon after the COVID outbreak, we thought the pandemic might have an impact on access to healthy food retailers, with some grocery stores closing and turning some communities into so-called food deserts. While the food hospitality sector was hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, with many business closures, very few grocery stores closed during the pandemic. In fact, many grocery store chains had record profits during COVID. So with our data, we could also map access to grocery stores. As can be seen from the dark shading on this map on the left, in most areas of WOWC, over 80% of the population lives within 5 kilometers or a short drive of a grocery store. However, there are some rural areas that are represented by very light shading. That means that less than 20% of the population in these areas has access to a grocery store within 5 kilometers. Recognizing that not everyone has access to a car, the map on the right considers grocery stores within walking distance. As illustrated by the predominantly light shading on this map, most areas are less than 20% of the population has access to a grocery store within walking distance of home. The second element of our study design was surveys. And here are the characteristics of our survey sample. As mentioned, we had 490 complete surveys. So we had 290 surveys from employees and 200 from employers, slightly more women than men. And we had a pretty good distribution by industry sectors. You can see fast food, restaurants, bars and pubs, groceries, etc. So we were happy with the distribution. The third element of our study design was interviews. Our original plan was to only interview business owners, but we realized in the middle of the project that we could learn a lot from speaking with others. So we interviewed 152 people. 21 were food retail employees. And now I should say food retail employees, we refer to those as workers who are employed at businesses that offer fresh and prepackaged food for sale in a store format. This included grocery, convenience, specialty food, farmers markets, alcohol, etc. So 21 were food retail employees, 19 were food retail employers, 28 were food hospitality employees. And by hospitality, we mean workers who were employed at businesses that offered hot and prepared foods made to order, takeaway, and deliver. This included restaurants, cafes, food courts, fast food bars, ice cream parlors, etc. And we had 55 food hospitality business employers. And by employers, we mean owners and upper management. And also we interviewed extra-sectoral stakeholders. And that's a bit of a tongue twister, but by that we mean supporting actors of the food retail and food hospitality sector that were not directly employed at a business defined above. This included those involved in business associations like BIAs, local and regional governments, urban and economic planning, real estate, and delivery workers. So from our survey, we learned a lot about financial hardships faced by employees. For example, we learned that over half of employees who completed the survey experienced decreased work hours and earnings, as this table shows. So you can see there that we about 24.5% greatly decreased weekly earnings and 35.5% greatly decreased hours of work. Additionally, we learned that over 1/3 of employees felt some or a lot of pressure to go to work sick. From this table, it seemed that men felt slightly more pressure than women. Their numbers were slightly higher. This table reports on employee and employer worries about being able to afford housing and food as a result of the pandemic. As can be seen by the numbers, about 1 in 4 people were very worried about not being able to afford housing due to the pandemic, and about 1 in 10, or 11%, of people were very worried about not being able to afford food. These fears were greater for employees than employers, as can be seen by the numbers. This quote from a restaurant employee really says it all. "I have been laid off 7 of the last 12 months. Financially, this has been pretty dramatic, pretty catastrophic." And this is a restaurant employee from Windsor earlier this year. Employers also experience financial hardship. Food businesses often had little or no warning of the rotating lockdowns initiated by the province to control the pandemic. The inability for owners to plan for lockdowns often caused substantial food waste and revenue loss. As this graphic shows, business owners reported major declines in business performance. The predominance of green color here on the left of the diagram indicates that most employers felt their business performance was excellent or good before the pandemic, while the predominance of red and orange on the right side of the diagram indicates that most employers felt their business performance was poor or satisfactory during the pandemic. In fact, more than 60% of businesses that reported having excellent or good performance pre-pandemic had declined to satisfactory or poor during the pandemic. And this quote from a food hospitality business owner in London is illustrative of what we heard. They said, "When we could only do takeout and delivery, we were doing 25% of our normal sales. When only patios were allowed, people stopped ordering since they could go out to other businesses. Our sales dropped to 7% of a normal month. And this business has been profitable for 12 years. Our survey also asked questions to learn about employee and employer well-being. Many employees experienced increased emotional and physical exhaustion throughout the pandemic as demands placed upon them by both the public and employers escalated. So this table shows change in physical health, sleep quality, and mental health during the pandemic. And as the numbers attest, we have really, most participants reported slight declines in all three of the health measures. Management was also under considerable strain, pressure dealing with the decreased revenues, mounting debt, and laying off staff. And this is one interesting quote from a restaurant owner. He creatively captured the frustrations of many. So looking at the potential to pivot, I think I'm going to poke somebody in the eye and in the nose when I hear that word, because it's an annoying word. You know, this ain't basketball we're playing. We're playing with grenades and live ammo is the way I look at it. And that's the only word I can think of because it's warfare. And it is unfortunate, but that is the reality. Despite hearing about hardships and declines in well-being, we also heard many positive stories. For example, employees cited management as a key supporter of their well-being. Supervisors increased their communications with staff, sought to create a more supportive workplace, and made efforts to accommodate staff scheduling. Business owners also listed going above and beyond customer expectations as a means of making their business feel safer. This had the added benefit of helping staff feel safe and management feel better connected to the community. One restaurant owner employee from London remarked, "So my manager has always been really good with that. He always let all of us know that if we ever need to talk or discuss anything, he's always there to help. Even if it's something he can't change for us, he's still always available." And one food retail manager from Guelph remarked, "My company always had different resources for health and wellness. I do feel like they've been increased, definitely marketed them more so than ever before." Another major theme that came up in the interviews and surveys was infrastructure. Infrastructure changes were often necessary for businesses to survive, and these took place both in the physical space and online space. This move resulted in unexpected costs, but for those who had systems already in place, they had less catching up to do. Rotating lockdowns often made these changes and investments unexpectedly useless and ineffective, leading to even more strain. Those lucky enough to have existing or space for new patios were able to pivot, that word again, and keep revenue coming in despite indoor dining bans. So this table shows the uptake of delivery and online ordering among business owners. So we asked the question, when did you start offering your delivery service? And we had 26.5% said prior to the pandemic, 26.5% also said during the pandemic, and 47% still do not offer a delivery service. We also asked, when did you start offering your online ordering and pickup service? We had 24% prior to the pandemic, 32% during the pandemic, and 44% do not offer. And we can see here that typically people who, businesses that had the service, had one, you typically had both services. So infrastructure was a common topic among the interviewees, as can be seen by these quotes. So one food hospitality owner from London back in spring 2020 said, "We had initially applied for a patio in January 2020, and it was in conversation for a few months. But then things fell off once COVID hit and the city shut down. Once the policy changes happened in the spring, we resubmitted and it was approved the next day. We opened a 180-seat patio 48 hours later." So positive response. And one food hospitality owner from Mississauga earlier this spring said, "Since we don't have dine-in anymore, we had to move all the tables to the back. And then every time the government announced that they might lift restrictions, we put it back up. And then they say, oh, never mind, we're going into lockdown. And we put it back again." So this really captures some of the frustrations of owners over the time. Given our rich mapping database, we are also able to illustrate some geographical patterns of infrastructure. For example, on the left here, we have the percentage of food hospitality businesses with open patios in WOWC by census subdivision. So again, the darker, the shading means the higher percentage of businesses that have that. So on average, 22.3% of food hospitality businesses had an open patio in the WOWC region. And I will caution some people that some areas, some dark areas may look very dark, like there's a lot of patio scene, but these are regions that don't have a lot of restaurants in general. And also on the right here, we have percentage of food hospitality businesses with drive-throughs in WOWC by census subdivision. And again, the darker the colors represent greater percentages. And on average, we had 8.8% of food hospitality businesses in the WOWC region having a drive-through. Another common strategy related to infrastructure and building resiliency was the growth of third-party delivery services, very contentious over the period. We learned a lot about delivery services from the mapping, the surveys, and the interviews. Many food hospitality owners have had little choice but to use third-party delivery services as they offer wide exposure to thousands of customers. Originally, these services were marketed to businesses as supplementary income to grow regular dining customers, making the high cost, the high transaction costs and fees acceptable. However, during the pandemic, these services moved from being a supplementary source of income to the primary source of income for many food hospitality businesses, especially when indoor dining was banned. The industry is starting to shift away from being dependent on these third-party delivery services to being more self-sufficient. And we are seeing new local delivery alternatives emerging really all over Canada. And this map on the right shows the percentage of food hospitality businesses with third-party delivery in WOWC. And again, the darker the region has higher percentage of the businesses that have third-party delivery. And what you see here really is as an urbanization or pattern going on here. The darker the areas tend to be the urban settlements. And of course, that all relates to population density and drive times. Another major theme of the findings, of course, was resiliency. There were many positive signs of resiliency exhibited by employers and employees. As lockdowns continued, businesses became more dependent on alternative business models. Many food retail locations moved from supplying commercial clients to supplying personal consumers. Businesses often cut staff and streamlined services to lower expenses wherever they could. And for those food retail and hospitality employees who remain employed, many discussed an increased awareness by their employers of mental health issues, the draining effect of COVID-19 on their mental well-being. And so, for example, here's a quote from a food hospitality owner from London. At the beginning of the pandemic, we created a grocery-style delivery service where we delivered fresh fruits and vegetables and others. We are basically running 4 different business models and seeing which one is the best to go with. And a food hospitality director from Waterloo told us in the winter of 2021, I and 2 other managers have become frontline staff. We are at the host stand, answering the phone, taking orders, processing payments, and then the kitchen managers and 2 of the former front of house managers who had past kitchen experience make all the food in the kitchen now. In the survey, we asked employees where they saw themselves in a year. And many employees expressed a desire to look beyond the industry, with 46.7% indicating a likeliness to do this within 1 year, in addition to 46.9% likely to go back to school, and 22.9% in total contemplating retirement. So that's the addition of the 2 columns of extremely likely and somewhat likely. And this might explain the labor shortages that many businesses are currently experiencing. We also asked employers the same question. So where do they see themselves in 1 year? Most employers, or 63.8%, saw themselves remaining in the sector. Many employers reported having increased their own work hours and being more hands-on by taking over activities that were once done by part-time staff. Okay, so based on all of the findings from our mapping and our surveys and our interviews and meetings with stakeholder organizations, we've collected numerous strategies for aiding the recovery of the industry and building resiliency for the future. On this slide, we present just a few of the strategies for employers in food retail and food hospitality businesses. And these are a few highlights, and there are many more that can be found in the full report. So first, utilize a point of sale system that streamlines both online and in-person purchasing within a single system. Work with other local retailers to buy supplies in bulk and coordinate supply deliveries. Partner with other businesses to share and expand product offerings at each other's stores. Promote staff mental well-being by creating and or supporting employee assistance programs. Consider creating an in-house delivery service or partner with other local businesses to create a more affordable communal delivery service. Design an emergency floor plan that's flexible for indoor and outdoor spaces to keep on hand in the event of future restrictions on customer capacity. Collaborate on promotional activities with other local businesses. Implement and or retain digital menus. They're quick, efficient, and more environmentally friendly. Audit your patio prices strategically to increase average margins by raising prices on targeted items while lowering prices for less popular items to increase value perception, or by slightly lowering prices on items that pair well together. The report also presents numerous strategies for employees in the food, retail, and hospitality sector. And here are a few highlights. Focus on your personal well-being outside of work to manage the impact of work-related stress. Initiate or participate in workplace support programs. Work with management to access training and conflict resolution to help deal with those difficult customer responses to mandatory COVID public health measures. Share knowledge about support and training program with coworkers and supervisors. Limit the use of alcohol or other drugs as a means of coping. Take technology breaks from watching, reading, or listening to the news. Got a new term called doom scrolling these days. So repeated updates about the pandemic and current affairs can be mentally exhausting. Increase your sense of control by developing a consistent daily routine whenever possible, something that's similar to your schedule before the pandemic. Use vacation and or mental health days to recharge yourself. Discuss with your boss the importance of mental health breaks. We also present numerous recommendations for extra-sectoral stakeholders, and here are a few municipal actions we wanted to highlight. Expedite applications for patios to reduce delays and promote more interactive streetscapes. Convert a portion of on-street parking spaces to dedicated temporary free parking spaces near restaurants and shops to support customer pickup. Create a collective e-commerce platform for multiple small businesses to sell their goods online in one marketplace. Implement a community improvement plan for areas within a municipality that have high concentrations of food businesses, allowing for a more robust and quick policy response. Provide accessible and clear information to local businesses on how to apply to available municipal grants and support programs. Direct municipally controlled entities to develop shared marketing campaigns and promotional offers to support local businesses. Waive parking tickets for non-safety or position violations based on proof of purchase at local businesses during lockdown, especially purchases that exceed the ticket amount. And institute definitions and controls for new forms of food-related businesses. We also collected several recommended strategies at the provincial level, such as implement a direct benefit paid sick leave system that immediately pays out to small business owners rather than a retroactive tax credit. Demonstrate flexibility and compassion in the enforcement of regulatory changes on business operations immediately following a transition period. Introduce legislation to create a highly competitive and sustainable third-party delivery industry that should involve transparency and capping of transaction fees for owners and customers, and additional protections for businesses, consumers, and drivers. Establish parity between the server minimum wage and minimum wage, and institute employee control over tip sharing policies in the workplace. At the federal level, some of our strategies include develop better income replacement supports for service sector employees that limit reductions from holding part-time employment. Targeted financial supports and infrastructure programs for the redevelopment of main streets and other vacant or underperforming commercial areas as designated by local municipalities. Empower local area municipalities to designate areas with active and or recently active public works to receive exemptions from typical incentive program rules that can be quite restrictive. Revenue-based business support programs should use the last 5 years of tax returns and eliminate limitations for all new businesses. Finally, I want to conclude by telling you a bit about our plans for Fresher moving forward. So it doesn't end here. First, we intend to conduct further in-depth statistical and qualitative analysis on the existing data. We want to analyze data from a recently developed household survey that we deployed in the region to gather data on consumer attitudes and preferences. And we're really trying to figure out what's it going to take to get local consumers back downtown or back into food retail. We want to distribute our findings to various stakeholders like yourselves on this call and continue to share insights through our website and social media channels. So if you go to our Fresher website, fresher.theheel.ca, you'll see a lot of reports. We did 13 plays of the week, which were our unique strategies and programs, were short stories on strategies, and 12 deep dishes about in-depth blogs about what's going on. And we're going to continue to update that website with material. And finally, we want to seek additional opportunities to engage groups of business owners, industry organizations, and extra-sectoral stakeholders to exchange knowledge, but also implement some of these ideas. We want to keep going. We want to think about some of these interventions that will help build resiliency, help get some of these businesses back on their feet. And with that, I just want to say thank you very much for listening, and I'm open for any questions. And also, please do, if you want more information, go to fresher.theheel.ca. And please do follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fresher_Canada.